neighbors, I would think, would be a critical variable because they've organized, and are concerned about this. And work out what I call parameters as to what limits or provisions would be the selectmen would, and I'm not saying sign on a dotted line, but would commit to as part of the process of implementing Article 20. So there's some specificity that can allay the concerns of the neighbors. And if there's simply the reflection of the overlay district and that and a reinforcing of that, I'm not an expert in the overlay district, so I don't know if that's the case or not, then you carry the discussion forward, and the neighbors presumably, and the pressure on, others I think would put pressure on them to be reasonable as part of this process, because people, anyway, just leave it at that. And then if there's some accord, then bring it back to town meeting with more definition in October.
May I ask further?
Yeah, there.
If not, go ahead.
There are other people, so if I could just.
Sure.
Yes, Jim?
Well, most of you know I spent a long time on the planning board. It was our experience in all the years I was on it that if you bring this motion forward and there's local opposition and it is a local bit of zoning, it won't get 2/3. In fact, it probably won't get 50%.
Correct.
And furthermore, if it is defeated, it cannot be brought up again for 2 years.
We know that.
That's
Well,
a
actually,
Right.
subject to ruling by the moderators. It's not the same motion.
Right.
it's interesting because I had a very strong view on this.
This isn't zoning, Jim.
This isn't a zoning.
So
This is just permission to sell the property.
This is permission to sell the property, so it can be
Okay.
brought up.
I'm not sure about what about discontinuance of the road?
It's not zoning either.
That's not
I
zoning.
understand it's not zoning.
Well, it's not a
Well,
2-year issue.
If I may, then I'm still, I mean, I'm now as I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable going any further with this and basically taking over the job of the planning board, if that's
It's
what.
not taking
Nobody's-
over the job of planning
Okay.
board in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
Not at all.
okay, can I
Doing-
recognize Angelo and then?
Okay.
Briefly,
Yes. I will be brief.
Okay.
The basic issue is the conditions under which that property can be sold are very clearly delineated. All right? We have an overlay district there. All right? We would negotiate with the developer, all right, for the sale of that property, contingent on 2 conditions. Well, now 3 conditions, but 2 conditions. Number 1, that they receive a permit from the planning board. We're not going to sell the property to them if they don't have a planning board, if they don't have a permit from the planning board, number 1. And number 2, any proposals they make have to be in concert with what has been outlined in the overlay district, which everybody has already voted on, everybody's already negotiated. So there is nothing, absolutely nothing that can come out of further discussion relative to conditions that would be put on the Board of Selectmen. You could come back and say, okay, the Board of Selectmen have the right to sell this property, assuming that all parking spaces are at street level, all replacement parking spaces. That's tantamount to not doing anything. You can't have a meaningful conversation with any developer, not necessarily the one that's interested, but any developer. They're not going to negotiate with themselves. They're only going to negotiate with somebody that has the right to make a deal. The last thing in the world the developer is going to do is negotiate with the Board of Selectmen or with the neighbors or with anybody, come to an agreement, and then find out in the next discussion that that agreement is no longer valid, and somebody says, how come you sold it for $500,000 instead of $502, or how come you got 50 parking spaces instead of 52 parking spaces? I feel very, very strongly about this. I intend to speak about it at town meeting, because I am not in favor of dismissing this article. I think we're taking we're forcing the situation into a no-win situation, a lose-lose situation, and it just is. The developer has no other choice but to scrap all plans that he has for doing any development that includes either the parking lot or the Horn Road, and only pursue the stuff that he has control over right now. And that's what's going to happen. And I think the town's going to be the loser because of that.
Mike, and then Roy, and Mark, is your hand up or not?
No, it's not, I'm just
Okay.
listening, I'm sorry.
I'll, obviously, let me to say the obvious, but as a moderator at town meeting, I will not be stating any position whatsoever, and I will be doing everything I can to allow a fair debate to take place. Wearing my warrant committee hat, I totally disagree with you, Angelo. I think your approach to follow what you're is absolutely creating the loss, the lose-lose that we want to avoid. This will lose, and we will be sent, we can, as Jim said, and I've town meeting for 27 years, neighborhood opposition, no way it's going to get 2 votes. So, I mean, so therefore, we send a message. Yeah, but this is the point.
Message has been sent anyway.
No, it hasn't.
hasn't.
It absolutely.
has not been sent.
It has been sent because I've had a dialogue with the developer already.
Well,
The
I don't-
message has been
The
sent.
message has not been sent. There is a responsibility to deal with the neighbors in a constructive way.
That's done through the planning board.
No,
That's
it
the
is
planning
not.
board process that deals with that.
No, that is not the planning board process.
Can we please have people speak as they should and then
Please,
respond in an appropriate order?
Please. Okay. Mike, do you have more to say? No, feel free, but,
Yeah,
and then
no,
then
just-
Roy.
The point that where I want to reach on this is that we come back, not just to dismiss and say, hey, go away developer, this developer, any other. I want the town to be in a position at the October town meeting to present this article and to have the neighbors, and most of the neighbors, I mean, there may be individuals, but right now there's united neighborhood opposition, and have the neighbors and all other parties, including the warrant committee, supporting this article, which will then pass, which will lead to development of the parcel. That's success. The course we're on now is failure. And that's how I see it in a nutshell.
Roy.
I'd like to respond at some point.
My impression is that there is a lot of general interest and support for some sort of development in Cushing Square. I think the concern is that it's the parameters of such a development right now are totally unknown. And that I understand that ultimately when a project goes forward, there are things that have to happen like conveyance of the parking lot and that sort of thing, because it seems that a likely development would include that parcel. It seems to me that it's really at this point, mainly a question of educating everybody as to what could happen, and the developer is free to the developer is free to describe proposals which at this point would be entirely hypothetical, conditioned on such a conveyance of the parking lot. There's nothing to stop the developer from publishing more plans in Belmont Citizens Forum newspaper, for example, for people to see what he has in mind. And I think that if between now and the fall there was a continued informal educational process, so to speak, not just for the immediate abutters, but really for the town as a whole, I think there would be a much higher comfort level with the whole idea, because right now I think many people have the impression that this proposal, which may not be unwelcome, it's come out of the blue basically so quickly, under the aegis of a community economic development structure which has not been used before or tested. Nobody really knows what to expect, so the impulse is simply to go slow. Certainly not. That's not equivalent to shutting the door on it.
Right. I also had a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, subsequent to the warrant committee meeting, the capital budget committee did meet. The capital budget committee voted unanimously 7-0 to request the selectmen to dismiss the article. And then we did the same thing the warrant committee did. It took a second vote. That vote was a split vote with 3 members voting in favor of the article as presented. 3 members voting against and 1 member abstaining. So it was really a split vote as to how they would feel there. And actually, at the Capital Budget Committee meeting, a far smaller group of neighbors attended the meeting than came to our meeting. And they did speak at the request of Dan LeClaire, who's on the Capital Budget Committee, and so he asked them to speak before the Capital Budget Committee voted, or really even discussed it. And so they actually did inform the Capital Budget Committee, unlike last week when our entire discussion and vote was taken before anybody in the audience ever said a word. So I just wanted the Warrant Committee to be aware of what the Capital Budget Committee had done. And the other thing I wanted to say is, just having read the articles, I don't see anywhere where it says this is contingent on anything at this time. You could indeed sell the parking lot to somebody else. You don't have to sell it to somebody who wants to. But you said that the article said X,
No,
and it
no, I
doesn't.
mean, you've got to, I think you've got to.
I'm only saying that that's not what the article said. Also, a member of the Capital Budget Committee who actually voted in favor of this article, although he feels strongly it should be dismissed at this time, for the reasons that Mike and Jim have already stated. He thinks it has no chance, but he will vote in favor of it. Felt that there should be an amendment or something on the discontinuance of Horn Road so that that would not happen at this time. It's unclear here, and the article is silent as to when that happens. And he was very uncomfortable voting to discontinue Horn Road, or allowing the selectmen to discontinue Horn Road now. He felt the article should be stronger. So those are the only 2 things I wanted to say tonight. Did anybody else have anything to say before Angelo asked to speak? Okay.
2 things. Number 1, Mike, in response to your ideal scenario, that assumes that the developer is going to be willing to sit down and negotiate with the neighbors. All right? And that's not an assumption that I'm willing to make at this point. And every indication that I have is that's not a road that he's going to go down at this point. All right? He's willing to negotiate with the town. He's willing to negotiate, go through the planning board process, which is well-defined and well-outlined. The neighbors have all the opportunity in the world to input all of their suggestions at the same time. But let me just give you a scenario very quickly. If this developer negotiates independently with the neighbors to get the neighbors to agree, the assumption and his concern is, then what's going to happen with the business community? Supposing he makes an agreement with the neighbors, and now all of a sudden the business abutters come back and say, whoa, wait a minute, that's not my understanding. You're taking this away from me, this away from me, and this away from me now. And so now he's going to get himself into a negotiating turmoil that he's never going to get out of. So from his perspective, let me just finish. From his perspective, I understand exactly what his concerns are, okay? So I don't think the inclination is, on his part, would be to sit down and negotiate with just one group of constituents without being able to negotiate with the entire group. And the way that happens is through the planning board process, number 1. Number 2, in response to your comment, Lauren, it is very well defined in terms of what can go there, because the overlay district is very specific in terms of floor area ratio, parking lot requirements, building heights, where they can go, where they can't go. That's all outlined in the overlay district when we structured the overlay district. That everybody has gone through that, has had a chance to input that. It is very unrealistic to expect a developer to be able to put together a proposal without knowing how much it's going to cost him to get the parking lot, to get control of the parking lot, or to get the easement released from on Horn Road. We could say in the negotiation, say, fine, we'll sell the parking lot for $1 million. We could say, we'll sell the parking lot, we'll give you the parking lot. I have no idea. I mean, what we've got is 3 selectmen. We've got Dan, myself, and Ralph that are going to be negotiating with the developer. And I would hope that we would have the confidence of the town that we would be doing it in the best interest of the town. And if we're not doing it in the best interest of the town, I'm really disappointed by that. All right? Because that's what we would be doing. The neighbors will have a chance to give all the input they want. The business community will have a chance. There'll be traffic studies done. There'll be all of the stuff that you've got to go through in order to get that permit. But there'll be no transaction that takes place unless a permit is granted in A, and B, unless that permit is granted consistent with what's involved in the overlay district.
I never suggested that the developer should negotiate with the neighbors. You should negotiate with the neighbors, the selectmen, in answer to that. That's the next step in this process. You, the three selectmen, are one.
I met with him for an hour and a half last night.
Good, and keep.
I got nowhere.
Well, and there's whether you got nowhere, I don't know who argued what. Obviously, I wasn't there, and that's not my province, and I don't want it to be. But it's not that I'm suggesting that the developer do this with the neighbors. We need to have the elected leaders of this town work through the process so that there is a unified, broadly unified town, including the neighbors, coming together to town meeting. That's leadership, and that's what I would put on the foot of the selectmen, not have the developer negotiate with the neighbors.
Can I just ask, when we asked him to respond to his question, he made a point. I don't understand the point he made. I'd like to understand it.
All right.
Okay. What would you like us to negotiate with the developer?
No,
give me an example. Give me an example.
No.
Give me an example of a
Neighbors
concession. No, he just said.
No, he didn't.
Neighbors.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I apologize. What would you like me to develop? What kind of concession would you like me to get?
I'm not even saying concession. I don't know enough about the specifics, and I've said that. I didn't speak up last week or this because I have a problem with the proposal or not. I haven't looked at the proposal. I spoke up because I think this was going to be a black eye, and it will be next Monday or Wednesday for Belmont, because it will be defeated, and we could, and that's going to be fine. I spoke up because I'd like to see us have this development, have the neighbors support it. I don't know what concessions or whatever. I'm not an expert in any of this. I've never purported to be. But I know it's going to lose. I know it's going to be a black eye, and I want to avoid that.
I did have a question. Angelo, you just said you were going to negotiate with the developer.
No, I meant to say the neighbors. I have not negotiated with them.
You said you were going to negotiate with the developer couldn't go forward until he knew what you were going. Right, and you're going to negotiate with the developer?
The selectmen would negotiate
with the developer?
With the developer.
Why? Why wouldn't you put out an RFP and anybody could respond to the RFP?
That
You
will
can't
happen.
negotiate with one developer?
That will happen as well. That will happen as well.
Is it appropriate to be negotiating with one developer?
Absolutely.
Jeff?
Clarification.
The terms of what's going to go in the RFP.
Oh, I don't think we should ever have a developer be writing our RFPs.
No.
Clarification, if
Sure.
I could. It's important to remember that there are two motions under this article. One deals with Horn Road,
Correct.
one deals with the parking lot. Horn Road, there is a negotiation that takes place between the selectmen and the property owner to whom the road property would devolve if it's discontinued, and that in this case happens to be this developer. There is no one else who can be involved in that discussion about getting the easement and getting a security. On the parking lot side, anybody can bid on the parking lot.
Right, and that's what I was addressing, the bid process, which we clearly should never be talking to somebody who is potentially bidding on something before we put it out to bid. I'd get creamed if I ever tried to do that with an architect or a contractor. Yes, Ralph?
If I could move the question, if there were a motion on the floor, I would. I want to thank Mike for making the motion. I appreciate the opportunity to hear everybody's opinion. I also appreciate you giving the opportunity for Angelo to make some comments on this because he was not here last week. But I did raise the question because I am truly, curious as to what this body was hoping the selectmen were going to do. And we still have not voted on this, so we haven't taken
Right,
a
and there isn't a motion on the floor yet.
We have to vote on this again now.
And
Okay.
I would like to say that last night, you actually represented to the town meeting members that the Warrant Committee and Capital Budget Committee asked to have this dismissed because they wanted to know everything about the development before forget exactly the way you put it, but that was not correct. Neither the Capital Budget Committee nor the Warrant Committee wanted control over whether it's 4 stories or 3 stories or black or blue or pink. What we asked for was that there be parameters in place before you convey the property.
I still don't understand what those parameters are.
I understand that,
I have no idea what you're looking for.
but neither the Warrant Committee nor the Capital Budget Committee, and I sit on both, so I know what happened at both of those tables, neither committee got into the particulars of the development itself. It was the process,
Precisely.
and it was not, and for many members of the Warrant Committee and the Capital Budget Committee, the request to dismiss was so that the article would have a chance of success. And it was not to control the development before it went out to bid. So if that was relayed to you by somebody, I don't know who it could have been, but that certainly is not what happened at either meeting.
I guess I still haven't got an answer to my question, and that is, what is it, what kind of restriction might I expect to see as a selectman on the sale of that property that isn't there already? What would we hope to see? That no buildings can be higher than 2 stories, that no buildings can be higher than 3 stories, that the building in this corner can only be 2 stories, and this one can only be 1
It has nothing to do with the
So
parking lot,
that's
as
my
far as I
point. My
know.
question is, what kind of restrictions would you want to put on the parking lot, on the sale of the parking lot? I have no idea what those
I
are.
answered that question.
I did last week, but Jim, did you have something, or are you going to move are you going to make a motion?
I was going to move that the warrant committee, again, recommend this article be withdrawn.
I'll second it.
Okay, is there any discussion on that? Mark?
I mean, I'm just reiterating what Mike said. I think Angelo can appreciate your frustration. I think we all have confidence that the Board of Selectmen will do what's best by the community. It's more about the process and making certain that the residents, the abutters of this development, the business community within Cushing Square, as well as the Warrant Committee, that they come together on it and agree on a proposal that will pass easily in the fall. And the concern is that it won't, because of the way that the process has sort of taken place at this point in time. And frankly, I mean, I read the articles in the newspaper after our vote last Wednesday, and the developer seemed to suggest that he's willing to listen and continue the debate. It seems like it could be a wonderful development for him and for the community as well, if it's appropriate for the town and for the abutters. And then I read Don Becker's article again, and they're very much against this, and I agree with Mike and with Jim that this goes to town meeting on Monday or Wednesday, it will be defeated, and then where do we go from there? I think we need to step back and say, we're still in support of this, Mr. Starr or whomever else may want to come forward. We believe that it's important to understand further what the needs and concerns are of the residents. I'm surprised that he would be completely against discussing anything with the residents. God, I wouldn't want a developer in my neighborhood having that type of an attitude. And then
That's not fair. He's been discussing with the residents for 2 years.
You said that he said that he wasn't willing to.
He's been talking with the residents for 2 years.
Well, Angela, I wasn't aware of that, so I
Okay.
apologize. I retract that
So, I mean, he's
statement.
gotten to a point where, the discussion.
But it seemed to suggest, Don Becker seemed to suggest that at some point he stopped listening to them and moving forward with a development that they don't support. And it's more about, in order for this to move forward and to be supported at town meeting, it seems like he needs to get to that point with them.
I move the question on my motion.
I knew you were going to do that. But if nobody seconds it, we don't have to take it up. So decide if somebody wants to second Jim's motion.
I'll second it.
All right. Then there's no debate. The question before us is now on Jim's motion to move the question.
Right.
All in favor of moving the question?
Aye.
Fine. Anyone opposed?
I am.
Okay. Anyone abstaining? No. Now, the motion that Jim made previously is the motion now on the table, which is the reconsideration of the request to the Board of Selectmen to dismiss the article. That is the motion that you initially made, right?
Yes.
Yes,
And
fine.
Jim's motion was to again recommend dismissal.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just
Yes.
trying to make sure what motion you did, you recommended we reconsider, and it was the recommendation to dismiss. Okay.
I think withdraw, right, was the words that were used?
well, it's dismissed.
Dismissed, okay, I used the word withdraw, but it doesn't matter.
I think you're actually right. Our motion was to withdraw, but dismiss and withdraw, it doesn't really matter either one. Okay, so all in favor of recommending the article be dismissed?
Can there be discussion before that, or?
No,
No.
unfortunately, no,
Okay.
because we moved the question, so we can't discuss it. So if you vote yes, you're voting to ask the selectmen to dismiss the article. Okay? Is that straight? And I said that right? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay, opposed? And anyone abstaining?
Thank you.
Okay. So that is the end of that. Anything else you wanted to bring up? Oh, that's it.
No, that's
Okay.
it.
Minutes from the 16th and the 9th. Shall we take up the minutes of the 9th first? Is there a motion to approve the minutes of April 9th?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And I abstained. And the minutes of the 16th, which was last week. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining?
I abstain.
Angela and Liz abstaining. Okay, now, in terms of schedule, for now, there is still a meeting scheduled for, I believe, 6:30 on Monday. Am I correct about the time, Barbara? At the high school. You will be notified via email in the morning if the meeting is going to be canceled. Okay, it's our, just in case we have business we need to discuss. So we anticipate right now that meeting will not be needed. But it's posted, you will be notified by noon time. Either way, we will send a notice telling you whether the meeting is on or off. Town meeting is anticipated probably to take 2 nights, right?
3 nights now.
3 nights now, okay.
3? Monday, Wednesday, when?
Article 20, if Article 20 has discussion, it'll take longer than 3 nights if it doesn't have discussion.
I don't know. I mean, see, I'm hoping to.
Town meeting will take as long as it takes. Monday and Wednesday for sure,
What would be the third?
the following Monday.
Monday, Wednesday, Monday.
Monday, Wednesday, Monday, Wednesday. Am I right, Mike?
Correct.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes?
The warrant committee's next meeting will be May 14th. And I believe the discussion on May 14th will be the Community Preservation Act. That's what I've been told. I'm also told the warrant committee will not be meeting on May 21st. So for those of you planning your calendars,
When is he? I'm sorry.
the warrant committee will meet on May 14th, and the warrant committee will discuss the Community Preservation Act. It's my understanding that there's some sort of a public meeting in this room on the 21st on the Community Preservation Act.
No, it's
Not in this
Not in this room? Okay.
I don't think we need.
So when is the next meeting? So-
I don't anticipate meeting.
Is there a meeting the 7th?
There is not.
The full
So the
hour
next
or 2
meeting-
hours for the
The next
CPA.
meeting of the warrant committee, right now, is scheduled for May 14th. Okay? There is not a meeting scheduled for May 7th. There is not a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday because we'll be at town meeting. And then the following Wednesday would be May 7th. There's no meeting scheduled. May 14th, we will meet. May 21st, we will not meet. And on the 14th, you will be given the schedule for the rest of the year. We will most likely meet the 28th. And we will most likely meet 1 or 2 times in June. One to do any transfers that have to be done. Oh, yes, with the Buildings and Grounds, Buildings Subcommittee, please look at the reserve fund transfer and get that sort of squared away with Kevin.
Well,
There is not one at this point, just want to let everybody
I
know.
know, but the subcommittee needs
Okay.
to
Okay.
be
That's
getting
fine.
on top of it and talking to him about the appropriateness of what's being asked. Okay. You're not, you have other members on the subcommittee you can assign.
We
it
do.
to.
I
Okay.
just, I mean, on the face of it, if he has trouble with people giving him bills that he thinks are inappropriate, my recommendation would be for him not to pay them.
That's why the subcommittee needs to, since we've gotten the memo, we need to
Okay.
step in there, so, rather than have that hang. So, and we will deal with the snow and ice budget. Hopefully, there is no more snow and ice. So, hopefully,
So 85.
we can deal with that in June, too. So, I will now, Jim?
In spite of the early hour, I move we adjourn.
He wasn't ready.
All in favor?
He was asleep.
He's asleep.
Yeah, see if we get enough names, maybe work.